There you go. So good morning and welcome to today's art class. The art classes that I run online are designed for intermediates and beginners. So if you've never touched a pastel before, then this is a really good opportunity to have a go at it, and it's a step-by-step process. So I take you through the whole process of doing a complete painting bit by bit, and we'll do it together. So welcome. Today's class, we are painting this beautiful landscape sunrise. I think it's a sunrise. This photo was taken by a friend of mine. He is actually a school teacher, and he does a lot of teaching out back in Australia. And he always takes really amazing photos of beautiful places. So we've done a few of Andrew's scenes, and this one I spotted on Facebook the other day, and I thought, oh, I'm going to grab that. It's gorgeous. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to really just travel around the sky there and create some really beautiful clouds. And then, of course, the reflection in the water. We've got lots of lovely contrast as well. So we've got beautiful light in the sky, and then we've got all this lovely dark down in the foreground, as well as in the greenery and the trees and so forth on the horizon. So that's today's notes, and I am now going to switch my screen over so that you can see what I'm doing on my desk. And I hope you enjoy today's class. Please speak up if you have any questions, or if you want to comment or anything like that. So I'm very happy to, do that. And I like to get your feedback. So it's important to me to know what you're thinking or feeling, or if you have questions. So please do that. Don't hesitate. I've just got to make my iPad do its thing. There we go. I'm just switching over to that now. So what you'll be able to see is my table or desk, and then we can work together from there. So just go into photo. Lovely. Zooming in a little bit. And so now you can see what's going on my table. What we're doing first up for today's class is a little charcoal sketch. So that's always a nice way to become familiar with what we're going to paint and just have a little rehearsal. I find it's really useful to do that and just have a practice run and see, and discover all the different parts of the painting that we're going to do today. So I'll just adjust the focus there so it doesn't keep wandering around and moving as we go. So that should be set now. No, it's not. There we go. All right. So the first part of the class we normally do is a little black and white charcoal sketch. Just one moment. The puppy's at the door. Yeah. She's going to lie down there at my feet. She's worn out after a nice long walk this morning. Great. All right. So what I normally like to use is a willow charcoal. It's quite soft, and it means that I can stick my fingers into it and I can push it around and really get some nice tones happening with it. I have a little tin here. It's a Nganmarriyanga one. It's not a brand I use a lot in most products, but for charcoal and pencils and things like that, it's not too bad. I'm not a fan of the Nganmarriyanga pastel paper, but these books are okay. These art diaries are fine to use too. So when you can save a bit of money, it's good, but just make sure you don't compromise quality for cheap stuff, because especially for pastels and papers, you really don't have a nice result if you use cheaper products. So this is the little Nganmarriyanga set of charcoal sticks. I like to have a skinny long one, and then I like to have a short fat one, because then I can kind of use them in different ways, and we'll talk about that in a second. On your notes, you'll see that we've got a colour version of the picture that we're painting today. Mine hasn't printed out very well. Obviously, I need to refill some ink. I've got a few stripes across the bottom there. Ignore those if you have something like that on your printout. And We've also got a black and white version. So the black and white version is to refer to when you want to know what your tones are within your painting. So if you want to know, where my lights need to go or where the darkest part of the painting is, just check your black and white version of that picture and it will show you where all the darks and the lights and the mids are. So if you look at that, you can see in the bottom left corner here is actually very, very dark. So that's going to offer us a really nice opportunity to get some lovely deep purples and darks in there. And then that will make the lighter colours pop more. So to make lights light, you need to have a dark contrast. It's just how we create the drama. And so having the black and white version really helps to find those tones. And this is the version we're going to be doing to start with the charcoal. So I'm just going to move that over to the side so I can see it easily. What I like to do is a little thumbnail on my page. So I just draw up the shape of the picture, whether it's landscape or portrait. Today it's landscape, so that means it's wider and across the top and then narrower on the sides. So you've got that lovely landscape shape. And the next thing I'm going to do is pop my grid mark on. So you can see on the colour version there that, I'll just do that a bit darker so you can see it on the screen. On the colour version, I've put a grid line on, so that means there's a line down the centre and across the middle. That's just a way to find where things sit within your picture. In this picture, it's quite a simple sort of layout with specific shapes. So we don't need any more grid lines. But if you have something with a bit more detail, you might want to do a finer grid. So you can actually break your page down into 16 squares or 8 sections, whatever works for you. So I find the more detail in something, the more grid marks I'll do, so that I'm just working in smaller segments at a time. The reason I like a grid is because I can look at each quarter or each section and just break that down into its own little area. So for instance, we're looking at the colour version to start with, just to get the grid mark in there and the shapes. If I cover up my right hand side of my picture and the bottom part of the picture and just focus on this top left quarter, then I can kind of figure out where things are without having to look at the whole thing. So it just breaks things down into small pieces. And you can see the horizon line in this image sits just above this halfway mark that we've got gridded in. So if I look at this top left hand quarter, I can see that this tree line sits up about that high. So I'm just marking in around about how high that sits in relation to the halfway line. So the top of that tree line would come across about there. And then it's like a stripe of dark trees, isn't it? There's like a bunch of dark trees on the very horizon there. And then in front of that, we've got green grass. So that's another line or mark that you can put in to indicate the bottom of the tree line here. And then this area, the trees in the background, are dark. So they're a darker green. And if you look at the black and white version, you can see they're actually a darker grey to what the grass is. So they're a darker tone, and that's what makes the beautiful bright sky pop, because we've got all this darkness in front of it. And then we've got the grass line. So you can see the grass line begins at the base of the tree line, which comes across there. So I'll make all that really, really dark. And we're just blocking in at this point. We're just blocking in the tones. So don't worry about detail and stuff. And then we've got the grass line. So it comes down about that far. So it's just across, again, just across the top of the midway line. And again, if you look at the grass line, you can see it's also a grey tone, but it's not as dark as the trees. So I can shade that in a little bit lighter and even smudge it with my fingers just to soften off that tone. And then checking back again with your black and white version to see the difference in tones or the levels of grey. And so noticing that that's got to be a little bit darker. And if you can darken up that tree line even more, press a bit firmer with your charcoal to get it blacker. And then you've got the, the very distinct difference in tones with your dark trees and then your grass. And then in front of the grass, just still within this quarter, we've got the water line. So the water line is much lighter. So I can almost leave that white at this point so that it stays very light. We'll rub out all these grid lines afterwards. Okay, and so that's quite light. Then you can see also just in this little section here, there's a little tree. It's in the foreground, or it's closer to us. It sits up just above the tree line there, and then it comes down inside that grass area. So it's dark. So make that a dark little blob of a tree. And so when something is darker or stronger in line, it means that it's closer to us in distance. So bringing that forward and closer to us is easy to do, because all you've got to do then is just kind of darken that off and lower it down below that tree line, so it's sitting within that grass area. And we've also got the reflection of that in the water here. So you can see the little shape of that in the water sitting about there. So if you do just a slightly lighter picture color there of the reflection, and that will, and then once we get some more detail into the water, then that will start to make more sense. So that's pretty much all we really need to pop into that area with regard to the landscape and the trees. I'm going to look at the sky section at the moment. So I'm still staying in this top left-hand quarter. So the sky section in the top left, in the grey version, you can see it's kind of got a little bit of grey, and everything's kind of coming from one point. So see the shape of the clouds? They're all sort of shooting out from the middle, aren't they? So that's what's so lovely about this, I think, is the direction of everything. It's got all these beautiful vanishing points. And so what I'm doing is very lightly rubbing my charcoal in the direction of those clouds. And a bit hard to see, isn't it, on the screen there? Let me change my light, see if that helps. That's better. And so what I'm doing is just very softly getting my short, fat bit of charcoal, lying it flat down on my page, and so just wiping it out in the direction of those little clouds. And so I want to start to create the feeling of the wind blowing those clouds out from the center. And then if you wanted to, you could just very lightly rub that in with your fingers just to indicate those beautiful different shades of grey. And that's pretty much all we need to do in that section there. So then we'll move across onto the right-hand quarter. And it's a similar layout on that side, isn't it? We'll just continue this little tree line. And you can see that it actually rises up further over onto the right-hand side. So we've got some taller trees over there, and they're also in the foreground. But if you look at the line or the outline of those, then we start to get all this lovely, a few little interesting bumps there on the right-hand side. So that makes it a little bit more interesting. It's also darker. So continuing on from the other side, we'll just bring that little tree line across where it's quite dark. And then the same with the grass line, so we can continue the grass across as well, making sure that you get the same tone or the same shade of grey, basically, in that grassy area. So it's not as dark as your tree line, but it is much darker than your water. And again, you can check back on your black and white version to find that. Once you've got all of that in, then you can do a few little tree marks for those trees that are on the right-hand side there, just to get some shape into those. I'm just doing little squiggly marks to indicate those and to bringing them lower than the other tree line so that they're closer to us, coming forward. There we go. So that's pretty much all of that. And then we've got to continue on with the sky. So we're just working on the top half now. And same kind of thing, just moving your short piece of charcoal, lying it down on the paper. I like to lie it down, and that way I can get a really nice, soft kind of shade without getting any too hard, a line. If you want hard lines, then you use the end of your stick of charcoal. But if you want something soft like this, then just lie it down on its side and just wipe it across the page really gently. And once you've done that, you can start again to just push it out with your fingers. And what I'm doing is pulling it in the same direction. So coming out from the center of the sky area and just trying to indicate, you know, the shape of those clouds. And just checking the black and white version, you can see on there that, you know, there's the clouds on the right side are lighter. They're pink in the colored version, but they're much lighter than the actual sky area in the black and white version. So my paper's also got a bit of texture on it, so it's creating these funny little stripe effects. But if you just push your finger into there, push it around, that should help to create that lovely range of tones. So that will do for the sky. So we've kind of rehearsed that part now and figured out, you know, how that all sort of sits. And then we need to come down and start to look at this grass line and the water line. So you can see the water line sits just above that halfway grid mark, doesn't it? And it goes across to there. We've got another little bush down through here, and that is also reflected in the water. And then across here, and we've got reflections in the water down through there as well. And then there's a little patch of grass that sort of comes across on the right-hand side. So we're down into this right-hand quarter now. And you can see the shape of that. It's like a triangular shape. So it comes across into that section there. And then we come down into more water. So I'm just using the thin piece of charcoal to softly draw in all these shapes or tones. So with the water, it's like all the water also kind of, the shapes and the colours in the water all come to that center point as well. So we've got this beautiful vanishing point in the sky and the water, obviously because the water is reflecting the sky. So it's going to be the same shapes and the same tones and things, but just reflected. And it's, you know, just important to notice which way you move your piece of charcoal or pastel to get that reflection happening. So if I'm looking now at the sky above this quarter, then I can darken that off down through here as well, because what I want to do is pretty much copy what I've got in the sky and have the same shapes and pull everything in the same direction. And then as you come down into the foreground, you want to get darker. So you can see on the black and white version, we actually get quite dark down here in the front. And that's what makes this so intriguing, I think, interesting to look at. So we've got all this beautiful grass down here, but under the grass, there's also water, and it's quite dark. It's actually a lot of purples in there. So what we want to do is kind of darken that off nicely, so then we can pop some grass over the top. Okay, so that's that bottom right-hand quarter. And again, with the reflections of the clouds in the water, just move your finger across there and blend that in gently, gently. You might want to, about now, take out that grid line because it is a bit distracting, starting to get kind of distracting and annoying. And I keep thinking it's part of the picture. So if you feel like removing that now, because we've got everything where it needs to be as far as in relation to those grid marks. So you can take those lines out, and that will now give us a clear run, I guess, of lines and marks that we need to be aware of. Just going back over here on the right hand side and filling in with grass, because that's all grass over there on the right. So at the bottom of the top quarter and the top of the bottom quarter, we've got a fair bit of greenery over in there, and just a little bit of water poking through. So be aware of that too, making sure that you just leave that little bit of water or a little bit of light to represent the water, sitting through there. So it's those small little light bits that really make a difference. I'll just move this across so I can see that better. There we go. All right, so now down here in the foreground, we've got all this water in here, and it's a little darker through there as it is in the sky. So we're reflecting what's in the sky, and it's a little lighter over on the right-hand side because that's where that lighter pink color is. And then we've got some grass in there. So to do the grass, let's just see, try my little thin stick to get some of this grassy kind of effect going on through there. So you want to do short little movements like this just to indicate the grasses that are growing out through that water in that section there. Okay, now if you've got this on an iPad or a screen nearby, it'll be a bit easier if you can zoom in and have a look and see the detail. If not, then just refer back to your picture. And again, it'll depend on how good your printer is and all those things. Mine is obviously running out of some sort of ink, so my picture's not that great. But even so, I can still do these little grassy kind of movements. What I'm doing is I'm literally leaving my little bit of charcoal on the paper and just running it up and down. I'm trying to create a lovely random sort of soft, natural looking grass through here. So I'm just leaving it on the paper and running it up and down, remembering to leave some of the water showing through in between these two clumps of grass here. And of course, when we do this in colour, we'll be using greens and purples and things like that. But in the black and white, we can do it with the charcoal. And I think that's working out quite nicely. So remember that from other classes when we've done grass, you just want to keep your mark quite loose. So I'll show you over here. I like to hold my bit of charcoal quite loose on the end. So don't hold it like you're drawing or writing. That's too stiff. It's easier if you just hold it on the end like this between 2 or 3 fingers. And then I'm just doing these little up and down kind of squiggly marks like that. And so as I'm doing that, I kind of twist the piece of charcoal around. And when you twist it around, you tend to get different widths or different shapes in your little strokes because it's such an uneven stick of charcoal. So, if you have a pencil, you'll find you'll have a point on a pencil and it'll kind of give you the same mark no matter how you roll it around because it's all even. But because charcoals and pastels tend to be uneven, you can get these really beautiful effects just with rolling them around and using different sides. And as they wear down where you use it, it gets a bit more smooth or wider. And then you kind of can twist it again and find another sharp bit or blunt bit. And so by doing that, and literally I'm leaving my charcoal on the paper, so I'm not really lifting it off. I'm not doing these kinds of movements. When you do that sort of thing, even though I'm trying to keep that quite natural, it can end up looking like a pattern because you keep doing the same mark and you're holding your hand in the same place, and it's not really creating that lovely soft wild feeling of the grass. Whereas in here, if I just literally leave my charcoal on the page, so I've just pressed really lightly there, so it's hardly making a mark, but if I want it to be darker or harder, I press harder. And so I just literally run up and down like that, and it just is much more natural and creates a really lovely feeling of wild grass. And don't forget to crisscross a few over here and there, maybe a few little bendy ones. They don't all go straight up and down. They have bends and folds and, crooked little bits as well. So I just find that's often a really nice way to get a lovely natural grassy kind of effect. So just literally leaving that loose on the paper and pushing harder and softer and going up and down and creating a lovely wild looking grass. So having said that, now we're going to move over into this left hand bottom quarter because that's pretty much our final area that we're going to do. And again, noticing how dark that is, so it's super dark down here. in the very front. So I want to press my little fat bit of charcoal down really firmly so I get that as dark as I can, and then come up into the water. And again, following the pattern in the sky of the lights and the darks. So remember, everything has a vanishing point, and it all seems to be kind of heading in towards the center or slightly off center. But we want to sort of replicate what's in the sky because this is a reflection of that. So just be aware of the direction that you're pulling your charcoal in so that you create the same feeling of everything kind of merging in to the middle as far as the clouds and the reflections go. So now I've got a bit of that bit of charcoal on there. I can push that around with my finger, soften it off a little bit, and again, make sure you pull it out in that direction from the vanishing point or the center point. And we've got all this beautiful dark here in the front. You might want to come back in and put more dark in, because if you know me, you'll know I love the drama of the dark. And again, my paper is a little textured, so it's starting to create strange little patterns in there. That's okay. And so we've got this front section really dark down through here. And just to get it dark, you just press a bit harder. Okay. And then maybe soften some of the, or pull it around with your fingers just to get the right kind of direction that you want through there. Okay. And then the same thing with the grass. There's a lot less grass on this side from what I can see. It's a bit more sparse. So we've got thicker grass on that right side there that we've just done. And then as you come across, we just want to do a few little strokes of grass. Now I know they're hard to see on that darker background. And when we do them in colour, it'll be a slightly lighter tone. So if you can look at your black and white version, you'll see the grasses are actually lighter than the water or the background. And so to achieve that with charcoal, you can either use a white charcoal pencil, which I can't see in my box at the moment, or you can use your kneadable eraser. So these are the erasers you can shape. So what I like to do is just pull a little bit off. It's a bit like blue tack. They're quite pliable, and shape a piece with a knife edge almost so that it's really thin. And then I can do all these little grassy kind of shapes with my eraser. So, and you'll have to keep kneading the eraser to find another little bit of clean edge, because as you do that, it's picking up the charcoal off the page, so it gets quite black and dirty. That's why these erasers get really filthy, because they fill up with pigment and colour. But see how doing that with my eraser, I can put a little bit of light back in there and get those little bits of grass to just shine on that dark water, dark background. It's quite lovely. You could even come across into the grass we did before on the right-hand side and lighten a little bit of that up as well. When we do this in pastel, then we can use white or a light coloured pastel to put the light grasses in. You know, I'm not white, light green, of course, because grass is green. Well, this grass is. So I'm just touching that up to make sure that I've got the right, the matching tones. So when you do break your picture into quarters and you work on each quarter, just make sure that they kind of all merge together at the end and it doesn't look like it's in pieces. So you want to make sure that, your quarters kind of all blend in together nicely and you haven't got too much of a division between the sections. It's just a really nice way to learn to draw things and to see things as you go. And then if you want to take more charcoal out and add more light into some areas that you feel maybe it needs a little to be lighter, then you can use the eraser again to do that, and just pulling that across and creating, beautiful shapes in the water there. So much like pastel, charcoal is very pliable and you can kind of do all sorts of cool things with it, and it comes off pretty easily, especially the willow charcoal. It's much easier to get that off your paper than it is the compressed charcoal, because it's a lot softer. So I'm just putting in, see those little bits of grass or growth that are running through the water there. So they're running in a horizontal direction, so that gives the water a little bit of body and a bit of interest, and kind of helps us to build up some of the texture in there. So just little soft little marks I'm doing with my charcoal stick, just pressing lightly and following the shape of some of those little bits of grass that are growing up through there. And remembering too, because these pieces of grass are further away from us, we can't see the detail as much as we can in this grass in the foreground. So if it's further away, it's going to be a sort of a softer shape rather than every little blade of grass. So have that in the back of your mind as well. Things that are further off are more blurred and soft, and things that are close to us and in foregrounds are much darker and more obvious, stronger lines, etc. So I think that will probably do us today for our little practice run with charcoal. And if you are inspired to keep doing it with charcoal and working with it, then by all means, go ahead. It's such a lovely medium, and it's very similar to pastels. So if you enjoy the texture of pastels and getting your fingers dirty and being able to push colour and tone around on the page, then charcoal's a lovely option. It's also really good practice to help you find tone in your art and just create awareness around, the lights and the darks and what's happening in your art. So charcoal's a lovely way to really, notice that stuff. And then it helps you when you're picking out colours, because you've got to look at your colours in tone and the way that you, what you choose to represent your dark, your mid and your light, etc. Cool. All right, so we'll leave that part there for now, and we'll move on and do the colour version with pastel. Okay, so I'm going to pop this away. Keep your charcoal handy. You might want that to draw up your picture for your pastel. And I need to go and grab a bit of paper because I haven't got any out just yet. So a nice colour paper for this. I think I've got all my small pieces still in my bag that I used for classes the other day. So let's see what I've got here. Okay, so normally I use a colour fix, which is the Art Spectrum brand. And I've only got A3 here in my drawer at the moment, but that's this brand here, Colour Fix. So it's great paper. It's very gritty and it hangs on to pastels really nicely. So it's usually what I use, but I forgot to get it out of my workshop kit, which is packed away up in the car. So to do an A4 or thereabouts, I'm going to use some of this, which is Pastelmat. Pastelmat is glorious paper. It's a little bit more expensive than the Colour Fix. It's a Clairefontaine, I think it's French. I'm not sure, probably. It's a beautiful paper, so it's not as gritty as Colour Fix, and it feels a little bit like a velvet almost. And it hangs onto pastel beautifully. So I'm going to indulge myself today and use a sheet of this. When you buy a pad like this, they come with the glassine sheets in between each page. So I could potentially just leave the painting inside the pad, which is kind of handy, isn't it? Because then you don't have to store it anywhere.
Nini?
Yes.
I notice you have some the pan pastel. Are you going to be using some of that?
I thought I might have a crack at a bit of pan today. Yeah.
I'd really like that.
Great. Yeah, I haven't used pan pastels very much before.
I only tried it once or twice. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, especially about how it would work on that paper you're just about to use.
Yeah.
I've used it on the Colour Fix.
Yeah.
And yeah, because it can take a lot of pastel with the Colour Fix. But I'm just curious because you are very limited with how many layers you can put on certain papers.
Yeah.
Is that
It-
right?
Yeah, this Pastelmat takes a lot more pastel.
Yeah. That's
Surprising.
very. And did you buy that from the local art
I did, yeah. Got it in Art Shed. Yeah.
shed?
I
Cool.
indulged. It was not cheap. I don't know what this
No. Yeah. I
12.
was just thinking if I had a project I was very serious about,
Yes.
I'd probably consider that one.
Yeah. I think for serious paintings that I'm going to do in future, I will probably use Pastelmat because I just enjoy it so much. And
In my classes here, I've just been using a normal paper, and the occasional colour fix. But this one, I think I'm very interested in.
yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
No worries. Cool. Yeah. So as I was saying, this is in a pad, so I could potentially leave it in a pad and just put this glassine over the top and then shut it down and it won't smudge. So glassine, if you don't know already, is wonderful paper. You can buy it in sheets, much bigger than this, to put on top of your painting after you're finished, or if you want to store it and you don't want it to smudge. And it's a really nice way to keep your paintings safe. The other great thing about pastels too is because we are working on paper rather than canvases. I was talking to someone about this last night. She was saying she works on canvas because she does acrylics, but she said, the problem is, where do I put all my paintings? She's just running out of space because there's nowhere to store them. And so the good thing about pastels is it's just paper, so we can actually stack quite a lot of paper, on top of each other in a big drawer or on a big clipboard or something like that. They don't take up as much space as canvases do. So, if you're doing a lot of art and you're worried about that, then I think pastels are a good option because the paper's flat, pretty much. So what will I do? Will I try that and see how we go? I think I might, not just see how we go. I feel like it's going to move too much though. I do like to tape my paper down into boards. Yeah, no, that's going to move and annoy me. So I'm going to tear this out of my little pad. Like that. And the glassine came with it. So when I'm finished my painting, I can pop that bit of glassine over the top of it and store it away for later on, or if I want to frame it or whatever. Okay, so now I need a little board. And as Marie just asked, I am going to have a bit of a play with pan pastels today. As I said, I haven't done a lot with pan pastels, but I keep seeing how great they are and how much people love them. So I figured, well, there must be something good about these things. So I thought I'd have a little bit of a play, and you can get to see what they do and how they're applied and all that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is just tape my little bit of paper down onto my board here. This measures the same as the colour fix. It's 23 by 30. So it should be the same dimensions as the picture that we've got for today's reference. Okay, so this is just old tape I used last week. The thing with tape is, I probably should do it all the way around actually. That'd be nicer when it's finished. Because the colour fix paper has a little white border around it, it's quite good because you can either tape your tape to that or and cover it, and then when you take it off, you have a nice, lovely, clean border all around your page. This one doesn't, so what I'll do is I'll use my tape. Now, when you do use tape, make sure you stick it to your tablecloth or something else first before you stick it onto your paper. I don't know how it will behave on this paper, but I do know that sometimes if you stick it down too much, it tears, and that's really disappointing if you've got a nice piece of artwork and it tears around the edges. So I like to kind of get some of the adhesive off my tape and either stick it onto my clothes or somewhere first, just so it's not too sticky, because sometimes it can damage the paper. Okay, so I've just done that onto my tablecloth. So the reason I'm taping around the whole edge for this particular one is so that when I take it off afterwards, I'll have a nice clean edge that is then able to be framed if you feel like framing it, or it'll just look a little tidier. Okay, so it does always look much nicer if there's a nice little edge around it. So you can see I'm not pressing too hard with the tape. I just don't want to push it down too much. It probably wouldn't tear this because it's already got a coating on it. It tears on the colour fix because that area that we take down onto, that white area, is usually uncoated. It's just plain old paper. It's more likely to tear. Okay, so put that down there. So now I've got a nice little area or border to work within. Okay, so I'm just going to put that there. So what we want to do first up is, if you feel like doing a grid, you don't have to, but if you feel like a grid will be helpful for you to get your drawing in the right spot, then by all means use that grid method again. So I will do that just for the purposes of the class. And I'm going to look for a light coloured pastel pencil or a charcoal. Oh, there's my white charcoal pencil. I love white charcoal pencils. They're just so good. So I'm going to find my halfway mark. And I'm going to also put that on my little bit of tape or the edge of your page, so that if you cover up your lines as you go on your painting, you've still got some reference point of that halfway mark, or where that grid mark is, if you need to work out where something needs to sit within your page. So I'm going to do that, and then halfway across here. So this is 23 by 30, so my halfway is 11.5. Up that way. Mark on there. And just very lightly draw my mark on there. I'm going to be filling all of this in with pastel, so I'm not too concerned about whether I mark the paper or not. If you don't want to mark your paper, then just press very lightly with your pencils. And I'm just checking to make sure that will come off okay. Because as I said, I've only used Pastelmat a few times, so that seems to be coming off all right. So that's all right with my kneadable eraser. All right, and so first thing we need to do is draw in each segment again. So let's start in that top right-hand corner. And so most of that is sky. And I would say probably even less than a quarter of the way up is where the horizon line is. So if this is halfway, and that's a quarter, it's just below there, I'm going to say, is where the tree line sits. So I'm just going to lightly draw in a bit of a tree line. I might continue that across while I'm here. So that's basically my tree line. It doesn't have to be dead straight either, as long as you have the horizon line straight. So that's pretty much that grass line, which is the bottom of the tree line. You might want to use a ruler. Let's do that, just to get it nice and straight. There's nothing more annoying than a crooked horizon line. And then we can interrupt that line, of course, with that tree that sits about here in the foreground, or that's closer to us. And then we've got all this beautiful sky. So I'm not going to mark anything in for that at this point, because I'm going to have a bit of a play with the pan pastels. Now, when I do that, if you have pans, by all means, feel free to do the same thing. But if you don't have pans, then just use your regular pastels. I'll probably use a bit of both as I go, but I just want to see how they go as far as filling in the background and getting a nice coverage of colour. So that's pretty much all I need to get into that section there. Okay, I've got my tree line, I've got my grass, and I've got a little bit of water just through there. So there's basically 3 sections. You've got your dark trees, your green grass, and then the water, which will continue down into the next bottom half. And then, of course, we can continue those lines across onto the right-hand side. So this paper is very soft. It's not as scratchy as the Colourfix or the Métience, whatever you might have. It's much smoother. But I have worked with it before a couple of times, and you can get a lot of pastel onto this paper. It's quite amazing how much it'll take. It's also softer to work on if you want to do blending. It doesn't hurt your fingers quite so much. Okay, so I've just come across and put that water line in, and continued the tree line across through there, and we can embellish on that later on. Then I've come down into this bottom right hand corner and just put that little triangular shape of grass in through here. And then we have all this grass down here in the foreground. So we can put all of that in afterwards. That will be all blocking in to begin with. Okay, so that's probably about all the detail we need to do with a pencil at this point for drawing this up. Next, we can start to look at some colours. So I've picked out a few colours earlier, and the way I do that is by just hovering my picture over my colours and trying to match what's in there, basically. So what I've got in there is it's quite a decent sized range of colours, and I'm just going to do a little swatch of those over here. So it's always good if you have a spare piece of paper or somewhere where you can do a little swatch of your colours. I've tried to keep them in range from light to dark. So as I talk through these, you might want to choose some out of your box. So my lightest one that I've got at this point, and I've reserved the right to go and find more if I need them, is this very pale pink. So I can see a lot of really light pink in through those clouds. So that's a very pale pink, not quite white, but close. And then I've got a darker pink. So this is like I don't know, sunset sort of yellowy pink colour. And again, I can see a lot of that in those clouds. If you're not sure, just drop your pastel on top of your picture and you can kind of, you know, find the colours in there. Okay. The other colour I found, and you may not have anything like this, but if you do, it's a bit of a bonus, is this kind of, it's a goldy, orangey, pinky kind of colour. And of course, that's what I can see in the sky there, is that beautiful pink and gold, yellow sort of tinge. So I found that. So you might have something like that, or a yellow that could be close to it. It would be more of an orange sort of yellow rather than a lemon yellow. Now I did also pick up this lemony yellow. I don't know whether that's going to work. The risk with using a yellow like that in with blue of the sky is that you could make green, and I don't want to make green in the sky, so I'm undecided about that. But I did pick it up because I could see a little bit of yellow just out in the outskirts on the edges of those clouds there, and that might be quite safe to put down once I've got pink underneath it. So I'll hang on to that for now. I also grabbed this orangey, it's a bit darker than that other orange, but I thought that was quite nice. I'm not sure if I will use that. I sort of see that in the colours in the water more than the sky, in those beautiful pinky orange tones. So they're all my pinks and oranges. Then I was looking at my purples. So there's a lot of purple and blue. So obviously we've got blue in the sky up there, and I felt that blue is maybe a bit dark, but that's what I'm going to use for now, unless I change my mind. And purple. So this purple is like a violet kind of purple, and I can see that in the water. So even though the water's reflecting the sky, it's actually darker than the sky. So we can kind of go a tone darker as we go into those sky colours. And I found this purple would be quite lovely, I think. And this other dark purple, which is gorgeous. So it's not blue violet, it's something else. I'm not sure what that's called, but it's a darker kind of dirty purple, and I can see that in the foreground in the water there, very definitely. And that's going to be beautiful. I might even have to go a bit darker actually. Did I pick up blue violet as well? I think I did. Yep, that's blue violet. So see how much darker that is? So both of those in that foreground there will give me lots of beautiful darks. So they're really nice for the water. And I've got pastel oil in the picture. And then, and just looking at the greens then, so the tree line has a lot more dark green in it. So I grabbed this dark green. I thought that's quite lovely to put into the tree line at the back there, and some of the shadows for the grasses and so forth. So a dark green, it's very nice. It's a really creamy one. And then I've got 2 or 3 other greens So there's this green here, which is more grassy green. So that's the lighter kind of green. And then I've got a brighter green just for, you know, all those little highlights of green in the foreground there, the little bits of grass. They've got more of a golden kind of tinge on the ones that are catching the light. And I've picked up this other green too. I don't know whether I'll use that. I might mix that with that one and create a little bit of a blend. So I've got 4 greens and they're all pretty close. Well, these two are fairly close in tone. And I have a light and a dark. They're a bit hard to see the colours because they get so grubby when they all hang out together. They pick up colours from each other. So that's pretty much the palette that I've chosen for today. As I said, I might want to go and get white, or I might want to find something darker as we go, but it's good to have something to start with. So that's that little palette ready to go. All right. So what I want to do though is just have a bit of a try with the pan pastels. And as I said, if you don't have pans, then that's absolutely fine. But yeah, just bear with me and we'll see what happens with these. They're actually really good. I don't know how they go for detail. I haven't tried it, so I can't say. But they're really good for doing backgrounds and for blocking in. I've only got a few colours. I've got about 5 or 6 colours. So I picked out these ones for this particular picture. I don't have any pale pink or anything like that. So I thought I'll just use these basic ones and block in where I can see those particular colours in the painting. And you can do the same thing with pastels. So you can see I've pretty much got similar colours chosen in my pastel set. So for instance, this deep purple is similar to that dark purple I picked out before. The green I've got there is similar to the mid green. So they're, you know, pretty much the same sort of colour. And then the blue is much like the sky blue that I picked out. So as I said, if you don't have pans, use your pastels in the same sort of way. I just want to try them out and see how we go. So when you have pan pastels, they recommend that you buy these soft sponge things to put them on with, because they can apply them really nicely. Now, I did try to cheat and buy, you know, cheap makeup sponges from the $2 shop. They're absolute rubbish. They don't work. So for some reason, I don't know what it is about these, but they've got a specific texture. Grab one out. They've got a specific texture. They're very, very spongy. And what's really cool about them is you can put a colour on, put it down, and then wipe this sponge onto some paper towel, and it sort of cleans it enough that you can then put another colour on and not stain it. So let's try that theory. I'll just use one today, and that's that one. You can get these in all different shapes and sizes. You can also get them on little plastic handles that have tips on them with different size tips that you can use for smaller areas. But I'm just going to use these to block in today, and then I'm going to use my regular pastels over the top. Cool? Cool. All right, so let's put those aside. And I might just grab a bit of paper towel so I can see how that goes as far as wiping the pan goes. Okay. So I'm going to start, let's start with some sky and where the blue is. So the blue is kind of all in the middle section here, you know, and fanning out from around the tree line there. So I want to get some of this blue on here. So I'm going to literally wipe it onto my little sponge and then put it down in here. And what I want to do is kind of pull it around in the direction that that cloud is going in. Okay. So, yeah, you do need to kind of add quite a lot. It looks like once you get enough on there, it does stick quite nicely. So I'm just going to fill in some of this blue, block it in. Now, if you want to do the same thing with your blue pastels, then do that. So grab your pastel and just start filling it all your page in where you can see blue. Knowing that you've got to kind of overlap where the tree line is, and we can come back over this with your pinks and things afterwards. What I try to do is where I'm definitely going to put my lighter colours or my pink or something, I'll leave that area uncovered. So try not to fill it all up with blue, because whatever you put underneath will actually impact on what you put above. So it's better if you can leave some of the paper painted if you want to have the pure colour over it. Okay, so that looks okay. That's kind of working all right. Just want to see how much more I need to add to get this to really fill up nicely. So it's working pretty nicely. I don't mind what that's doing at all. I'm literally just dabbing it onto my pan. So a pan, these little pans, it's literally just pigment packed into a pan, a bit like makeup. And it's quite hard. If they crumble and break, you can still use it. It's just not set as hard, but you can still use these little sponges and get the same effect. Okay, so that's looking all right. And because I want to get that big wide sky feeling, this sponge is really good for that because it's kind of pulling it in that direction. Lovely. Cool. All right, so I think that's not too bad. And obviously I can add more and more and more. So you can actually build up your layers quite thick with the pans. And the beauty of these is you can get a lot more coverage down in a shorter time, pretty much. So I can get quite a lot of pastel on my page without having to do too much blending and things with my fingers. So I guess this is the way of blending pastels, but you call it pan instead. I don't know what all those little bits of crumb are. Maybe it's part of the sponge. Yeah, it looks like some of the sponge is breaking off. That's interesting. For the price you pay, you don't want that to be happening. These are not cheap, these things. Okay. All right, so that's a bit of sky, and I can come back and put pastel over the top of that and get that lighter and change it around if I want to. I'm going to now try this theory about cleaning this off with paper towel. So I'm trying to get all the blue off so that when I go for some green, which I'll do next, hopefully it won't put too much blue through it. All right, so a little bit of green now, and I want to pop that across the horizon there. So literally just again blocking in, and this is the same thing that you want to be doing with your pastels. Okay, it's just getting a lot more down in a shorter time, I guess, and getting those base colours down, because as you know, when you're working in pastels, it's I like to block in first, get all my colour on kind of in big shapes, and then you start to work on the detail as you build up your layers. Okay, so I'm just getting some green on where I need to get some green. This is very loose and very rough, so we're just going gently at this point. And see, that's pretty good. So the blue didn't actually come out in the green at all, which is kind of cool. So paper towel obviously is the answer for that when you want to clean these little sponges off. I believe you can wash them too. I've yet to try that. Okay. So that's a bit of green. And as I said, do the same thing if you have pastels. Just put some green down in those areas there. Don't worry about the green in the foreground because that's going to sit on top of the water, so we'll do that later. So we're just getting some background colours and blocking in at the moment. All right, so I'm going to wipe that off now and test the theory again. I mean, I can turn this around and use other sides of it, of course, because it's still clean on 3 sides pretty much. But now I want to pop some purple down. So I want to put the purple down here in the foreground and some up here where it's in the water there. Okay, so same thing with the purple, just wiping it onto my pan like this, getting quite a lot onto the little sponge, and then just pushing that in to the paper, like so. And again, I'm kind of going to pull it in the same direction that it's going in on the picture. So that right from the beginning, when you're blocking in anything, make sure that you block in or pull the colour around in the direction that you want it to end up in. So this is all heading in towards the centre, into that vanishing point. Weird squeaky noise, but anyway. And so lots of dark, dark purple down in here, because I want this lovely and dark on the bottom right corner. And I might have to put some blue violet in there just to darken it off even more, because I want that grass to glow on top of it afterwards. So always thinking about how am I going to, get the grass to shine or pick up some light. And what I need to do in this instance is just to make sure we get it nice and dark first underneath. So I didn't talk about paper colour before, but paper colour probably doesn't really matter too much for this particular painting today, because we're filling it all in. If I had used Colour Fix, I probably would have gone for an Australian grey or something with a purpley kind of tinge. There we go. So I've got a bit of that down on there. And I just feel like I can keep sort of adding that until it gets lovely and thick, but I don't want to do that too much, because I want to come back over with my pastels and my sticks. There you go. So that's pretty much blocked in now with pans. And as I said, I don't have any light pinks or anything. I have got a white, I think it's like a glittery sort of white, so I don't really want to use that for my lights. So I'll move over to the pastel sticks now and start using them. But that's not too bad for a background. And I know, people do birds and feathers and all sorts of things with these things. So it would just be a matter of having the right little sponges and the right shapes and sizes and learning the movements with them. Quite cool. But yeah, you can get quite a lot on there. That's good. So I've never been that interested in the pans and thought, I don't know about those. But I think for filling in large areas like this, it's quite useful, because then you can start to build up the detail with the sticks. So the pans are good too, because they all screw on top of each other. So I've got a little set of just 5, I think. Literally just screw those back on like that. And they just sit on top of each other in a little pile like that, and store them away. And you get quite a lot of pastel in those, so they hold quite a lot of pigment. There we go. So that was that bit of fun. So now I'm going to grab my pastels and start to kind of block in some of the areas that I can see with those. I might tip off some of the dust and crumbs first. So if you're working flat on a table like this, then try not to blow the pastel dust away, because it ends up all over the place. You just want to make sure that you tip it off onto a cloth or something afterwards. All right, when you've got your picture handy, so what I like to do is have it propped up in front of me. So I'm just going to fold this in half, and then I like to prop it up there just so I can see it really easily in front of me. And the less I have to move my head to turn to look at it, the better. So if I can just glance at it quickly, it just makes it a whole lot easier. I've also got my image on an iPad over to the side, so I can also look at that and refer to that and zoom in if I need to find the detail. All right. So actually, I think we might have a little break. So I'm just going to try hand pastels onto a bit of Ngammarriyanga paper, because I feel like it works better on a smoother paper that doesn't have as much grip. A bit hard to see on the dark blue, but that's got a really nice coverage actually. It's filling that up really well. I've got purple mixed in there because I didn't clean it, but and this is the textured side of Ngammarriyanga paper. So that's actually, yeah, really nice. It's lovely and smooth and looks like it's filling that paper up quite well. So maybe a smoother paper is better for pans than the Colour Fix or the gritty paper. But I'll try that next time. Yeah, I do remember that now. Much nicer on there. All right. And because this Pastelmat is quite smooth, I'm getting a pretty good result with that too. Slightly different, but yeah. Anyway, let's carry on with our regular pastels now and start to keep blocking in some colours. I don't know what's happened there. I must have put some pink on there. Never mind. All right. So make sure you've got a little towel or something nearby so you can wipe your hands when you need to, and clean them off in between pastels. So let's start in the sky area. And so we've got quite a lot of blue in the sky. I want to pop a bit more blue down on there because the blue pastel I picked up is slightly lighter than that pan. So on this paper, it's quite gorgeous. And I remember now you have to get quite a lot of pastel down onto the page to kind of get it to hang on. But what you can do with this Pastelmat is sort of put it down and then layer more pastel over the top to sort of blend it in. I'm going to see what happens if I use my fingers. So I just wanted to get some nice, a bit lighter blue on there. And then if I push that around, what's happening is it's picking up with the other pastel underneath, so the pan that's underneath. And I feel like I need to add more pastel. Yeah, that's what we need to do. So on the Colour Fix paper that we generally use, I feel like the pastel blends a lot easier and seems to kind of mix in much easier than it does on this one. You can see on here that it's leaving quite a bit of, it's quite thin, so you can still see the paper underneath, which isn't a bad thing. I quite like how that's working. But if you wanted it to be a really intense blue and to fill up that paper, you've got to add quite a bit more pastel to make it start to do what you want it to do. So see how I've put now 3 or 4 layers on there, and I'm pushing that around with my fingers now, and it's really getting lovely and thick and rich. So it is possible, but you've just got to add more and more pastel. The lovely thing is this Pastelmat will take quite a bit of pastel before it won't accept anymore. So so that's quite good, isn't it? So I can just keep rubbing that in and getting it nice and thick. So this is where you can really get into some blending. And of course my fingers aren't hurting quite as much as usual because it's not as gritty to touch. There we go. Now you might have a lighter blue, you might have different, purpley kind of colour, something lilac might be lovely in this sky. So while I'm blocking this in, I'm thinking about the reflection in the water, because what we need to do is make sure we have a similar shape in the water so that it looks like reflection. And I am having to get quite a lot of pastel down on here. And again, I'm trying to pull it around in the direction of the sky, or the way the wind's blowing, the clouds are moving. Pushing that around like that, getting it nice and thick and rich and blue. Now, potentially I could leave that as it is and just let that paper kind of show through. It has a sort of a nice cloudy feeling about it. So, and that's the lovely thing, isn't it, about using these different papers, because they all give us different results, and we can actually rely on the texture of the paper to create different looks and feels. Okay. So it's very, very blue, very blue. I think I need it to be a little bit more mauve than that. Make sure you come down to behind the tree line, because you don't want to have big gaps between the trees and the sky. So you need to sort of overlap that a little bit there. so that when we put the trees in front of it, we've got a nice continuous sky going on. There we go. So I don't mind the look of that. I quite like that sort of textured impression that I'm getting through there. Okay, so that's the blue sky, and because we've got some of that up there, I want to add some of it down here in the water. So I know it's darker down here, it's a much darker tone, probably because of the time of day. But if I pop some of that blue, because I already put the purple down before with the pan pastels, if I get some of the blue down in here, then that will all sort of mingle in nicely. And this area we want to be lovely and smooth, don't we? And we also want to pull it in a horizontal direction when you blend it. Okay, come crossways like this. And having that purple underneath just gives it that lovely darkish tinge. See how that sort of looks like it's reflecting what I've got above now? Even though it's got texture in it from the paper, it's sort of looking like it's, yeah, the reflection of that. Nice. I quite like this loose, abstract sort of effect. And of course, everyone's got different tastes, and you might prefer yours to be, you know, smoother. And again, depending on the paper. So this paper requires quite a lot of pastel. It's beautiful to work on though. It really is a lovely paper. You can get a lot of pastel in here. Okay. What I'm finding though is, and I know Leslie's used this a lot, is that if I just put a little bit down like this, see, it's hard to blend. It kind of won't blend because there's not enough pastel there. So if you want to blend your pastel and get it lovely and smooth, you've got to get a lot onto the page. You need a lot to get down in there first. Otherwise, there's nothing to mix it with. You know, it's kind of like having, you know, just a little bit of sand and trying to make a sandcastle. You really need to have a big pile of it so that you can get it to mix through. What I'm doing here is just looking at the shapes of the light that's shining on the water. So I know I said to run horizontal because the water's flat, but at the same time, I want to get some of these sort of longish shapes in there as well, just to try and emulate the feeling of those big clouds and the vanishing point and the direction that they're all running in. So just a few little lines or stripes like that, sort of fanning out from that center area with your blue, will start to give us that feeling of the shapes. So I can already see now how it's kind of expanding up into the sky and then down into the water and kind of emulating that, which is kind of fun. Very cool. All right. Now I know I can add more pastel over the top of this if I want to. Do I want to? I might go to the pinks and things and have a play with those and see what happens. You can always come back and put more of your blues or whatever you want to put in as you go. We need to really think about the order of how we're going to do this. So even though I've done sky and water and a bit of the, you know, grass blocking in at this point, now's the time to start thinking about the process. So what we really need to do is work from top to bottom, I think, because that's how everything is sort of sitting within this image. Because it's a landscape, we've got big wide sky, but essentially the sky is sort of at the back, or, you know, the furthermost thing away. And then in front of the sky, you've got your tree line, which is your darker green trees. And then we've got the grass, which is the next layer. And then we've got the water. And we've also got this patch of grass here. So we're going to kind of work from top to bottom. And then the final detail in the foreground is going to be that grass that's sitting in the water there. So we've got to kind of, when you're doing a pastel piece, I find it much easier to work from the background to the foreground, basically. It just means that if I do the sky now, I don't have to go back in there afterwards and try to, get it in around trees and things. So I'm just being practical, really. That's how I roll. And saving time, basically, and trouble. So you just want to make it as easy for yourself as you can too. Try not to make things too complicated. So let's get stuck into the sky. As we do the sky though, we're going to be adding the same sort of colours into the water. Now I know we said we're going to work from top to bottom, and we will when it comes to detail, but we're still kind of going to be blocking in a little bit in the water, because what I want to do is pick up my pink, for instance, and put some of that down in the sky, like here. But then as you do that, you want to be putting it down in the water as well, so that you're doing those reflection sort of movements or marks as you go. And that way you'll use the same colours, and you kind of, don't then have to come in later and go, oh, is that pink or this pink? When we can kind of do it all at the same time. So that's where I'm going to head with this. But then as we start working on the details, then we can really come down in the picture. Okay, so I'm just going to get some of this beautiful pinky colour in here, and you'll see I've got the little stick of pastel. I just literally lie it down on my page, and so it's flat, it's a short piece, and pull it across in the direction of those clouds. So I'm trying to emulate that feeling of that big, wide, beautiful sunrise or sunset sky, and the direction that everything's kind of coming in. Okay, and noticing that some areas with the pink anyway are a little darker, and other areas are more wispy. So these are clouds, they're wispy clouds, thicker clouds, and they vary a lot in the light and what light they catch, and the shapes and so forth. So what I want to do is to get a lot of this pink down, and you'll find where you overlap it with the blue, you'll start to get some purpley sort of tinges, and that's okay. And then where we've left, for instance, up in this right-hand top corner, I've left most of that with no blue, because I want that pink to be really, really nice and intense. And so I can get it really intense because I don't have any other colours on the paper. So it's not going to get blended in with anything else. It's just going to stay quite pure. I know the cloud in the picture still has blue behind it, and we can come back in and add some of that afterwards. I just want to get that in there first, and then we can build it up. And so, as I said before, then I can come down into my water and do the reflection of that through here. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to be as bright or as heavy, but I just want to make sure I get those shapes to reflect and look like it is in the sky. I kind of got to do the opposite marks. You don't have to press hard, you don't have to put a lot of colour down just yet. We're really just feeling our way around and starting to create a base. And noticing in the water too where it's much pinker. So on this left-hand side, there's a lot of pink there. Again, just blocking in. We're not doing any detail at this point. I feel like I need to get a lilac. So once you've got a bit of that down, and it's all kind of starting to come together, and of course this is the messy stage when things don't really look like anything much. It's just a big blobs of colour onto your paper, but we've got to start somewhere, so it's a really nice way to get some background colours down. Okay, and so now I've got that on there, I just want to get my fingers into it and start to push it around a little bit and soften off some of these marks. And if you press harder, then you're going to blend the blue and the pink together. Again, making sure that you kind of rub it in the direction that the clouds are going in. So because they're going in this lovely angle that all kind of come from the middle, make sure you're pulling that pigment out in that direction. And see, as you pull it, it starts to emulate that shape, and you can almost feel the wind blowing the clouds in that direction. Again, I'm still seeing a lot of my paper showing through, so this Pastelmat paper, as lovely as it is, you need a lot of pastel on there to really fill it up. You can potentially choose to leave it as it is. A lot of people do. They really like the look of that, that kind of, you know, paper showing through kind of look. And if it's a dark paper like I've got, then it's quite nice on with the lighter pastel. Just gives it a more painterly feel, I guess. And if you want that, if you don't want to make like a photographic kind of painting, often that's nice to have that impressionist kind of effect. I'm quite liking it, to be honest. Normally I paint pretty tight and I like everything to be very detailed and filled in, but I might see how long I can live with this. I'm not making any promises. I might decide later on that I can't live with it and I've got to fill it all up. I know myself well enough to think that's probably what will happen. But for now, yeah, I don't mind what that's doing. Okay, so I've just kind of pushed all of this in a little bit into the paper, because what I want to do is just not have a loose pastel sitting on the surface. I'm going to grab my blue again. So over on this right-hand cloud, so I picked up my blue pastel. I'm just going to waft a little bit of blue around over that pinky cloud. Remember I said I put quite an intense pink down on this corner because I didn't have blue underneath it. So it's given me a lovely, rich, pinky colour. But the cloud itself is quite wispy, and so I need some of the sky to sort of show through. So if I come back over with blue in a couple of spots and push that around, that'll start to give me that lovely, transparent, cloudy feeling that I'm looking for. So even if you have put a colour down underneath and you put something else over the top, don't be afraid to go back with the first colour and add that again. You can layer pastel until the cows come home, pretty much. Well, until the paper won't take anymore, and that'll depend on the paper. So this paper takes a lot of pastel, and I'm really loving how this is starting to look with that lovely wispy cloud feeling and the layers. And I can do the same thing over here on this side too. If I want to get a bit more blue in there and just start to zhoosh that around on top of my pinks now, then I'm building up my layers of pastel and it's starting to create a really nice combination of tones and colours. Lovely. Okay. Now, the other colour I wanted to get in here is a little bit of pale yellow, if I can, or that golden sort of pinky colour, just to give it some warmth and light. You can see in the image there's quite a lot of yellow or gold, and a lot of it's up here on the left-hand side, and there's big, beautiful, bold, stripe kind of shapes. I'm reluctant to use this yellow because it's going to turn my blue to green. So I'm going to avoid that one and run with this one, which is kind of an apricot-y colour. I do have a paler pink that I can add over the top if I want to lighten it up, but I'm just going to see what this one does because I don't want to make green. And because this is an orange colour, so it's got red in it and yellow, but it's got that lovely red bridge. So when you want to mix, if you want to put like a red or a yellow into a sky like this, it's always good to have something that's got a bit of a red base because it's like a bridging colour between the blue and the yellow, so it's not going to make too much green, hopefully. Depends how much you blend it as well. So if I started to kind of blend all of this in with my fingers, it would probably go a little bit green because of the blue and the yellow. But if I just use the pastels, and this is the beauty of the pastels, you have so many ways of mixing them around together and blending them that depending on what you do, you'll get some really great and different outcomes. So if I just literally wipe my pastel onto here and don't blend it in with my fingers, what happens is the colour sits nicely on the top. doesn't mix too much with what's underneath, so it retains its integrity and its pigment. You see how that's happening? It's really nice, isn't it? So it's, and I'm not blending it. If I put my fingers in there, it's going to start to get a bit muddy and ugly. So I'm going to really try hard not to stick my fingers into this and just use the pastels as sticks to create the colours that I want, and I think that's working really well. It looks very much like oil painting when you do it this way, and I think this paper contributes to that as well. So I'm just going to whift it around here and there to get a little bit more of that golden light happening. You know, when the clouds catch the light at sunset, and just one part of them will get the really bright sunny part, and then other parts will be more wispy, and you can see the sky through them, so they're not quite as bright. So I'm finding that's what's kind of happening here, which is quite lovely. Quite lovely. Loving that yellow colour in there. It's really nice. Now, I'm just going to do an experiment. You don't have to do this. I just want to see what happens. So if I add this other yellow, this is the one I was afraid of putting on because I didn't want to make green. But because if I'm now putting it over the top of that other orange colour, so I've kind of got a barrier between the green and this yellow, blue, sorry. And so now that's letting me kind of leave it sitting on the surface so I can get this gorgeous sunshine yellow happening in there. I know that's not in the actual photo. The photo is a lot quieter and not as bright as this, but I quite like what that does. It's kind of fun. So don't be afraid to experiment with different colours. And if that didn't work out, I could just go back over it with a pink and push it all back in. It sort of works quite well. I'm going to pop a bit of that yellow over on this side too. Putting it on top of the pink will retain its brightness and the orange of it. Yeah, nice. And then if it's too much, so as I said before, if it's too bright and I don't like the yellowness of it and I want to keep it more pinky, just go over the top of it again with your pinks and push it in a little bit. You'll still retain brightness and it'll just go a little bit more orangey. That's lovely. So everyone's going to have different skies depending on your colours, how much of each colour you put down, what you like. You know, we'll all like different things and different effects. You might want your sky to be a little bit more mauve rather than blue. It is quite mauve in the picture. And so bearing in mind what we've just done with those brighter colours now, probably want to do similar sort of marks just down here in the water as well to make sure that we, you know, have that reflection integrity happening. So I've just picked up that orangey yellow colour that I used first in the sky, just to create a little bit of that, the similar sort of colours down in here. Again, being aware that yellow and blue will make green, so make sure you have a bridging colour in between them. And that means by a bridging colour, how can I explain that? Okay, I'll do it on this bit of paper. So if I have blue like this, okay, and then I have yellow, right? Blue and yellow will make green. There's my yellow, there's my blue. Put them together and we get green, which is beautiful. If I don't want to do that, so if I want to have a blue sky and I want to have yellow cloud but I don't want to make green, then you need a bridging colour. So a bridging colour will be something with red in it. Now that could be a red or an orange. Let's try this orange. No, that'll go brown. Let me find a red. So that'll describe it much better. So if I grab a red and I put that next to blue, like this, red and blue make purple. So red and blue make a beautiful purple. So that's, I'm thinking sunset skies here, if you don't want to put green into a sky. Then blue and red make purple. So purple's perfectly beautiful in the sky. And then my yellow. So my bridging colour's red because that will not make green now. So red and yellow make orange and red and blue make purple. But I'm not going to get green if I have a bridging colour or red in between them. So if you're doing a sunset sky or something like what we're doing here today, and I don't want to make green with red and blue, what am I doing? Yellow and blue, then putting down the pinks or the oranges in between or underneath is going to help me avoid that, which is what's happened over here. When I put the yellow over the pink, it's maintained its yellow. It hasn't picked up blue and created a green. So yeah, a good thing to think about when you're mixing up your colours for sunsets and things. All right, so let's carry on. I'm just going to add a bit more blue over this cloud here. So you can kind of keep mucking around with that a little bit until you get your clouds looking the way you want them to. Now we can come back and do more to them later on because there is still plenty of space to do that if you want to. But, you know, as I said earlier, I like to try and complete one part first and then move on. You can always go and touch things up, but it's nice if it's pretty much done and then you can move on to the next bit. So the next bit we need to look at is the horizon of the trees. And so that's a dark green colour. Well, it's a couple of greens in there really. So I'm going to start with the mid green. Now I know I've already blocked in some of that with my pans, but I'm going to use this green pastel now just to draw a line across there where those trees are. Okay, and I'm just doing it quite loosely because they're sort of fluffy tops, so it's not a hard straight line. We've got these lovely soft fluffy tree tops going through there, and then I'm going to use my dark green and go over the top, so that's going to build up a nice shadow, I guess, or tone in between the trees and the grass. I'm going to pop a bit of that green down here in the grass as well. This little pastel is, it's Blue Earth is the brand, and they're quite glorious. They're really soft. I like the little square shapes because I can lie it flat on its side and use it in a nice wide mark, or I can use the tip and get a sharp edge. I can use the corners to get a line. So the little square pastels are really good for that sort of thing, because you can get lots of different shapes out of them. All right, so I've just got my little tree line in there, and I've got my grass in there, and I'm going to put this down as a bit of a base for some of the grass. Okay. Because I've got another green there already, it's starting to now look like there's some lovely tones happening. Now before I jump any further ahead, remember that little bit of water that's in here. I'm just going to mark it in with pink at the moment, but I'll have to put a bit of blue on there. There's that little bit of water through there that we want to retain and keep nice and bright, because that's a little bit of a highlight, that section there. And we'll put the dark tree and stuff in afterwards. But I just want to make sure I don't lose that. So I put a bit of pink and a bit of blue in there. Just make sure we keep the brightness of that, because that'll be a nice little feature afterwards. Okay, cool. I can pink it up a bit more actually. Always come back and change it afterwards, but I just want to make sure I don't lose it. And you know, if this gets covered in green, it's going to be a bit harder to brighten. Okay, so there we go. So I've got a tree line and I've got some grass. So now I'm going to use my dark green. So that's this darkest green I've got. Same brand, Blue Earth. And I'm just going to sort of dab a little bit of that around on the tree line. Okay, because all these trees at the back there are darker. They're further away, but they're casting shadow and they're quite thick and dense. So what I want to do is build up that lovely richness of the trees in the background there. And I'm just doing light little squiggly movements over the top of that other green that I put down before, because what I'm trying to do is create a bit of a range, I guess, of greens throughout there. There we go. So just loose little movements and marks. I've just seen then that everything looks like it's running in the same direction because I was holding my pastel the same way all the way across there. So now I'm going to twist my arm a little bit, hold it in a different angle and try to mix up those marks so that they're a bit more natural looking. Make sure you have a few furry tops. These trees are far, far away. We can't see every single leaf and branch and stuff. So it's really just loose little smudgy marks to indicate the shapes. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a fairly biggish shrub there. So that's more in the foreground, but again, we can still just do these loose sort of smudgy marks. There's a little tree there that's got a bit of sky hole through it. So in this section here, I'm just leaving a little bit of the blue showing through, so it looks like there's sky coming through there. And then underneath that in front, it's a bit darker. So where I need to darken up, I can use a bit of blue violet. There's a couple of bunches of trees that sort of sit in the foreground, and they're the ones that are reflected in the water. Yeah. So there's one here. It sits up slightly taller than the tree line, and it comes down through there. Again, just little loose smudgy marks, and then it's got the reflection of that in the water there. So just put a little bit of a mark there, remembering that the water runs horizontally, so do some little horizontal lines pretty much, and that should start to look like a bit of a reflection. I probably made this one a bit big, but I can tidy that up with a bit more blue over here. You kind of just go over things and clean them up a bit as you go. Yeah, cool. Now in the foreground of that grassy area there, so that's this section in here, you can kind of see reeds and a bit of shadow and bits and bobs. So I'm just going to pop a bit of dark green just across the front of the grass through there, but don't make it a continuous line. You kind of want to break it up a little bit so that it's got, you know, a natural look of maybe some shadow or hill or something like that. Just gently, gently, a few little lines through there. So what we're doing is noticing where there's like shadow and tone and shade and things like that, just within those green sections. Okay. And you'll notice on the where the green grass meets the water, there's usually a bit of shadow or dark. And so to indicate that, you just want to use a little bit of dark green and maybe even some purple or blue violet. Let's try a bit of purple. Purple is always lovely in the greens because it creates such a nice shadow. I'm just over on the right hand side here with a bit of purple to get some shadow happening in there. That's quite lovely. Purple is always a good option. So when you mix purple with green, you kind of get this lovely muddy colour, which is perfect for grass. Just doing a few little blotches of purple over there. Purple can often be a lighter section too, where maybe the light's catching it. Because we've got a lot of blue and pink in the sky, then purple will be reflected in the earth. So whatever you see in the sky will be below. I'll just put a bit of purple in the sky then. It's quite nice. I thought I'd left my sky alone and finished, but okay. So that's looking pretty cool. And now what I want to do is just put a little bit of blue violet, or that dark purple actually. We'll try some of this in to get a bit more depth into the grasses around here and under that tree. Is that going to be enough? I'm going to try blue violet actually and see. I always go for the darkest in the end, don't I? I can't help myself. I do love it. Yeah, that's better. See how that's just giving it a lot more shadow and depth. So if you don't have a blue violet, which is almost black, it's a dark, dark, dark purple. My favourite dark. It's lovely for shadows. Oh, there's a tree there. I missed that bit. Put that in there. It's great for shadows. So if you don't have one though, then a black will be fine. Something zoomed in on my picture and now I've added an extra tree because I thought there was. Oh well, that's okay. Maybe there is. We'll make one. So this is the nice thing. You can actually create your own scene. Lovely. Yeah, so the blue violet's lovely because it just gives you that little bit of depth in your tone. So even though the dark green was lovely and dark, it's still not quite dark enough to give me the distance that I'm after. So that's all starting to come together now. And then in those bushes that are sort of a little bit closer to us, the ones that are reflecting in the water, they also have a bit more depth to them because we can see more detail because there's shadow and things in there and they're closer. So the closer something is, the more detail you can see. So you want to be a little bit more defined about your lights and your darks in those things. So for instance, this shrub here, it's sort of sitting in front of all the trees, has light and dark areas on it. It's like a little cluster of bushes or something. And so just knowing that and then adding a little bit of light in there and varying the tones a bit just brings it closer, brings it forward. Might do the same on this little tree here, just to give it a bit more light. So more detail, more definition in things that are closer. I do love my limey green colours. You know, as I said earlier, this is your painting, so you get to choose what you put in there. If you want to add more white or more brights, different colours, then go for it. I think it's kind of daring to do that too sometimes. So what I've done there is I've popped a little bit of the lightest green just in a few spots in that grass there. And I like it because it feels like it's catching the light. It's also making the dark shadow areas more dramatic. And I like that too. That's kind of cool. Because then it makes them stand out a bit more up against the other colours. So always thinking about, you know, your lights and darks and how something can stand out or look like it's closer. I'm just going back in with dark green now just to thicken up that little cluster of trees and things in there. Okay, so there's lots of stuff going on in the grass over on the right side too. I don't know if you've looked closely there, but there's little clusters of grasses and water and stuff. I'm just going to block in a few shades of green here and there and just kind of let that take its own shape without getting caught up in the detail. Something like that. Cool. So once we've got all the greenery happening, and if you haven't quite got to that point and got it completed, then don't stress. We can come back and work on it afterwards if you run out of time. I just want to get down into this water and start working on that. So I have added a couple of trees in there. You're welcome to do the same or not, up to you. Like I said, it's your painting. And let's work on this water. So what we want to do now is get the water to kind of fill up a bit more. We've got the basics down there. We've kind of mapped it all in. And now I just want to start to get a lot more pastel on here. And what I'm discovering with this paper is that it's much easier to work with if you don't get your fingers into it and just let the pastels do the work and let them kind of blend together and do all that without using your fingers too much. I'm finding that's actually working really nicely. And it's still giving me that really lovely, I don't know, see-through effect, so I can still see the paper underneath, that dark paper, which is quite nice. So yeah, nice paper would be my verdict. So I'm just putting some more blue on here because I want to get this nice and kind of smooth, I suppose. The water's very smooth. There's no wind. It's all very, very like glassy, isn't it? Yeah, really smooth. So I've got some blue back down on there, and now I'm going to go back in with some pinks again. I want to start getting those pinks into the water, creating those lovely reflections. Putting the pink over the blue. Might create some purples, but that's okay. And you can see there's little bits of grasses and things poking up through this water too, and we'll put those in afterwards. Noticing too that the angle of the reflections in the water needs to sort of reflect what's in the sky. So make sure that you are moving your pastel in those directions so that you're picking up, you know, the same as the sky. And it's all kind of stemming from that center point there. Or what's often called a vanishing point. So I'm literally just using the pastels to blend themselves together without sticking my fingers into it. I'm going to find a violet. I feel like I want something a bit more purpley in there. Maybe this will do. This is a darker purple. I'm just popping that over some of the blue, because what I want to do is sort of merge this into a really dark in the foreground. So I did put a dark purple down there initially, but I want to add that over the top and maybe even darken it more. So I want the drama of the dark right down here in this corner. That'll make the lights pop then. Getting a little bit of dust on the paper too, so I'm going to have to tip some of that off. So I'll tip that off. I'm going to go find a violet, like a very light purple colour. Put some of that into the water. It might smooth it out a bit. So this is a light violet kind of colour. I'm just going to gently wipe that over just to lighten it off. So I'm going in over the blue, and they're kind of working quite nicely together to create that lovely violet sort of colour. The water in the picture is quite light, especially towards the sky. So the top half is really light, and then as we come forward into the bottom section of the painting, it's getting much darker. So, and I want to retain the brightness of the light section and the depth of the dark, because that just makes it more interesting. So this is a mauve. It's a light mauve colour. It's sort of a pinky tinge, I guess. And if I wanted to, I could add some of that yellowy, orangey colour into there. I don't know. I might. I'll put some on here on this side. And then over here on the left-hand side of the water, it's quite light too. So it's quite bright there. I've just gone over those reflections I've put in before of the trees. Put them in again after. So you want to be aware of the angle of the clouds, so the direction or the shape, I guess, of the clouds as they sit on the water. You also want to be doing horizontal kind of movements to get the smoothness of the water. I'm going to try my fingers in here, just can't help myself. So I want to make it super smooth and glassy and kind of fill in as much as I can. So see how that's just sort of smoothing everything out. It's quite nice. If I keep running in a horizontal direction, then hopefully it'll start to look kind of watery. And just blurs those little clouds off a bit. And then I can add more clouds if I want to. So I might try this pale pink now, which is nearly white. It's so light, just to get a bit more light in there. And then I'm going to probably add some of that orangey yellow colour, just so that it reflects the sky without making green, because I'm going to have the pink in between. So I grab some of that pinky colour. Beautiful. That's nice. And swooshing that around too. So because I'm putting this down over the lighter pink, it's still retaining its brightness pretty much. Keeping nice and light. So water's interesting because you've got to put reflections of whatever you're doing in there. And remembering that water sort of usually sits flat. So this kind of water is very flat. There's no movement in it. So you've got to make sure you do you pull the pastel across in a flat movement so that you're retaining the feeling of water. But then you also want to make sure that you get the right direction of the clouds as you go. So it's a bit of a combination of changing directions, I guess. So for instance, this little shiny bit here, this is that golden bit on that cloud in the middle. I'm trying to make a reflection of. And it's starting to fill up with pastel now, so it's having trouble hanging on to the paper because I've got quite a bit of pastel on there. And this is very creamy, this one, so that'll make a difference as well. I think your harder pastels work probably nicer on this paper. So things like pencils, your Faber pastels, the harder sticks, would probably be really good on this paper. Okay, so now I'm going to add a bit more of that sunshine just up through here. Okay. So we want to get those reflections in the water that's in the sky. Because I put my orange down, I'm going to add yellow over the top of that now. So again, avoiding making green because I've got my pinks or my orange in between. And also letting the colour sit on the surface, so not pushing it in will also help to avoid the green. I'm going to put some of that over here too, on the other side, just so that it reflects what's in the sky. Now I know my shapes are not exactly the same as the sky. I'm not too concerned about that, to be honest. You know, if you wanted to do exactly the same, then by all means have a go at that. But I'm just keeping it sort of the same, but not.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, and now I want to just mark those reflections of the trees in again. So I'm just going to pop a little, and you keep these kind of loose, and you do little line sort of work, because what we're trying to do is put ripples of water through those reflections. So I'm just using my mid-green for now, and then I'll darken that up in a sec with my dark green. So put a bit of dark green. These are the two trees I made up, so you may not have those ones. Just a bit of dark green in there, like that. Just lightly, it doesn't have to be very dark. Reflections are generally lighter than the actual thing. So, you know, if the tree is really dark, then the reflection will normally generally be lighter. Of course, you know, that's not always true because of the light and differences in angles and lights and shades and stuff like that. But in general, that's the case. All right. And so just to make those look more like reflections, what we want to do is just run a little bit of light colour. Now what I'm going to do is use the tip of my pastel. I just want to do some very soft lines through here like this. I'm not pressing very hard. I just want to make little soft lines through there and carry them, pull them through those reflection shapes that you've done. You might need to wipe your pastel off so that you don't put green somewhere else. Keep those little marks sort of round. That will look like water. Okay. So just breaking up those reflections with some of the lighter pink or blue or whatever you want to use, depending on what colour your water is. So I've got a bit of blue here, so I can pull a bit of blue through there as well. And then on the other side it's more pink, so I can just leave all of that sort of more pink over here, a little bit of blue in there too. Just soft little light lines to get those reflections to look like they're in water, but they're much softer. Okay, now we want to get down into this foreground. So if you're happy with where your water is at the moment, and you can come back and do some more work on that if you want to, and you know, kind of start to push in some of this pinks. Put green in there by accident. So when you do something like that, put a big blob of dark where you don't want it, just grab whatever other pastel you had there before, your pink or whatever it was, and just go over it a few times until it's kind of pushed it in. If that doesn't work, you can't get more pastel on, you might need to get a little stiff brush and brush it off. So sometimes if you've loaded your page up with lots of pastel and you can't get any more on and you want to, a little stiff brush is really good because you can just sort of brush it all off and then start again pretty much. Yeah, lovely. If you want to put more movement into your water, so for instance, I might, you know, want it to look like there's a little bit of wind or air or movement, you can just literally grab your pinks or your blues or a bit of both and run the edge of the pastel around the water like this and make very fine little lines. Just make sure you stay in a horizontal direction and kind of do these broken lines. So you just want different widths running across like that, and you can just break them up gently, and maybe as you come closer we'll just use less and less. So depending on how you want your water to look, if you want it super glassy, like the photo, then you might need to blend a little bit more and just get it to sort of sit softly on the top and push it all in a bit more so you get a much smoother kind of finish. Cool. All right, so now I'm going to get stuck down into this foreground. What we want to do is get some really darks down into here and then slowly merge them up towards the middle area of the water and get like, and then dark down on the right side as well. Once we've got the darks down, then we can get some grasses in there. And that'll bring everything closer to us and give it more interest, I think. So I've got my blue violet. This is my favourite dark again, so I might as well just go straight for that. I've already put purple down before. Remember we did that earlier at the beginning. So I've got purple down already, and I'm going to put some blue violet down because that's a beautiful dark, and it's always glorious for your shadows and things. And I'm just going to gently pull some of that up in towards the water. So as you head up towards the middle of the water, just press a little bit lighter. You might want to use a dark purple or something. We've all got different colours, so if you don't have a blue violet, then a deep purple might be lovely, or a super dark blue, something within the purpley blue kind of range of colours. And so as I'm doing that, I'm just going to pull that up through here. Okay. Now on the left side, that dark section is quite smooth. The border there is quite smooth, but on the right side, we've got a lot of grass in there, so there's a lot of movement. So you can kind of move your pastel around to emulate whatever is in that section. So for instance, on the right here, I've got my little bit of pastel. I'm lying it down flat on my page, but if I just run that up and down lightly, what I'm trying to do is get that kind of grassy, soft effect. And then I'll put grass over the top of my greens, but this is going to be a nice foundation to get that effect of grass. And same kind of thing in the bottom corner here. Just running it up and down like this gives it a more grassy look, right? Then as we come across, see in the middle here, just off to the left of the middle, it's really quite black or dark purple in there, and it's much smoother because there's less grass. So I want that area to be smoother. So what I'm going to do is try and push all that one in with my fingers and smooth it off so that I get this smooth, glassy effect in the water. I might need to add some more pastel over this if it's not enough. And as I work my way up into the water, just gently pull that dark up in through there. Make sure you're running your finger in a horizontal direction so that we're maintaining the movement or the shape of the water on that left-hand side. Okay. The tricky bit is not pushing it around too much to muddy up our yellow or our sky. So we want to try and make sure that we keep it really dark down here in the foreground. Lovely and dark down in here. Gently pull those purples up into the water. And I'm doing that starting at the bottom of the page. So I've got pigment here already. I probably need a bit more. But what I'm doing is getting my finger like this and doing these little sideways movements, right? And then pulling that up into the water and then lifting up. So very gently dragging some of that dark pigment up into this section here. Short pastel, just very lightly. This blue violet's very strong colour, very strong. So you don't want to put too much down because it's damn hard to get off if you want to get it off. Okay, so just go gently and put too much down to begin with. Okay, so I've got that going on, and what I'm going to do now is actually put a bit of my blue over that. So I want to start to merge the blue and the purple together. You might find you'll have to come back and put your clouds in again or brighten them up a bit more. That's okay, we can do that. I just want to merge those two together so I'm getting a nice gradual blend from this dark all the way up into the light. Softly, softly, softly. Gently, gently. All the way up into there. Pull that across to the front there into where the grass is on the right. So that's giving me a really nice range from light to dark. This is too light in here, I'm just saying. So on the right hand side where I've got that pinky colour going on, it's a little bit too yellow. I'm going to quieten that down with some mauve. It's not quite that bright in there amongst all the grass. Okay, so just put a bit of mauve in through there. That's the light pinky mauve. While I've got that in my hand, I may as well just pop a bit more of that cloud back over the top of these colours that I've just merged through. Because I still want the clouds to sort of sit on the surface and reflect in the water. But we had to get the water kind of in first underneath all of that. There we go. So that's starting to look pretty nice. Softly, just softly blurring off all my edges. Softly pushing this into, and then I can come back over this area on the right where the grasses are and just do a few more little dark up and down movements to try and get that grassiness happening in there. See how by moving, depends on the gestures that you use, doesn't it? Depends on how you move your pastel as to what you see. And by doing these little up and down short, sharp movements to emulate the grass or the background of the grass, what's underneath it, really gives it the feeling of that texture. It's lovely. Okay, I'm just going to push some of this in over here again. All right, so now's the time to kind of assess everything. Now, is the water as bright as you need it? Have you got your clouds where you want them? Do you need to add more blue or purple or pale pink or whatever it is to make it look like it is reflecting? I'd be happy to leave it as it is. Whatever excites and delights you. It's often good to stand up and walk away from your painting and then come back, like literally look away from it and change your view and then come back and look at it. And it's amazing what you see when you take your eyes off it for a little while. It really does help to see where you might need to add some more light or dark or whatever. So having said that, hopefully you've done that now, and we're going to move on and put some of the grass in the foreground there, and we'll put a few of those little what look like reeds or growth kind of just poking up through the water here and there. That'll give it a bit more integrity and make it look a bit more natural, and then we'll be pretty much done. So I'm going to pick up my mid-green. So this is the green I used to put the base down before for the grasses. And I'm just going to start to flick this around and get a bit of grass going on in here. My intention is to use different greens to create different tones of green through here. And I don't want all of it to be really bright. I just want to highlight a few areas of it. So that's why I'm using a mid-green initially. And so when you do that, just make sure that you move your pastel in the direction of the grass. So you want to be using the sharp edge or the end, whichever end is going to give you a fine sort of line. And again, remember we did the grasses before in the charcoal, so it's the same kind of thing. You just want to be moving the little bit of pastel around like this, and I'm kind of lifting it off just a tiny bit and going up and down and slightly, bending some of the grasses over in different areas so that they kind of overlap each other. So this is the first layer. So we just want to do a few like that and come across the page, short little grassy movements. And you can see that those grasses at the back are smaller and shorter, so you just want to do little short marks for those ones. And then as we get closer to the foreground or the bottom of the painting, the grasses get a little bit taller. So knowing that will help you, you know, figure out where everything is. And it also helps determine, you know, to see where everything sits in relation to your perspective and your distance. So I'm just coming across, as you come across on the left, we've got much less grass poking through there. So you don't have to have as much poking through there. It's a lot thicker and more lush over here on the right. And then kind of thins out a bit as you get over to the left side. So that's the first layer. And we've got a few random strands through there. Don't forget to put some on the side. You know, they don't always all grow up straight up and down. They bend a little bit and arc over. Okay, so that's my mid green. Now I'm going to pick up my darker green. That's the darkest one that I used in the background before, and do the similar sort of thing. So we're just creating some layers really. And because these pastels are very soft, I'm not going to press too hard because I don't want it to be a strong, hard one. I'm just going to build up the thickness of these glasses. So we've already got our lovely dark background underneath, which is great. We've established that. And then we're going to be layering these glasses in here in a few different tones of green so that we're building up the lush.
Jeannie, Lynn here, your voice is fading.
Oh, sorry, I must be speaking quieter. Is that better?
That's better. It could be your battery's going flat on the microphone.
No, it's plugged into the computer, so it's just me fading away. I'm getting tired.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so yeah, speaking up, good. So just making sure that we're layering this grass, creating a few different tones of green. So, you know, we're getting a nice variation in the darks and the lights and so forth. So that's 2 tones of green now that I've placed on there. While I've got this in my hand, I'm just going to darken up a little bit around the edge of the grass over there on the right. Okay, and now we can pick up another green. So I've got my brighter green. This is this winey green, which is quite lovely. And I can see there's quite a few bits of grass that are catching the light here in the foreground. So we don't want to brighten up all of them because then that'll lose its impact. It won't be as interesting or dramatic, I guess, if you brighten up every strand of grass with the light green. But we do want to just get a little bit of light into some of them, and that will really help to create some depth. Now, I've just noticed in here is too light again, so I'm going to put a bit more blue in there. So this is what happens, you see, you get to this point and you think, oh gosh, the water's not the right colour in there, it needs to be darker or something. And so I'm going to have to come back in over that now with more grass and add that in, but that's okay. We can. It's a lovely thing about pastels is you can literally just keep layering and layering. Okay, so that's this section here. I feel like I've kind of made it a bit too bright for a minute. So I'm just going to brighten it down a little bit. And now I've done that, I want to add a little bit more grass to kind of get my grasses back. As you can see by coming in with this colour to get the sky reflection in there, I've lost my grass ends. That's okay. I can just do this. Come back in. And again with my dark green, just pushing that around like that. And overlapping a little bit and creating those lovely soft edges. So remember, your grasses are all natural. They're wild grasses. There's none of this stuff in mold or maintained. So it's wild and it's loose. And you want to make sure that you retain the look of that. So keep your mark quite loose. Try to keep your hand loose and keep your mark sort of, you know, random so that you're not making patterns or creating the same size or heights all the time. Okay. So see, it's quite easy to sort of patch things up and then come back in and redo stuff. I'm also going to pick up some of my dark purple because this is the dark purple I used earlier. It's not the blue violet, it's a little bit lighter than that, just to get a bit of do grasses in that colour as well, but that'll help to create some depth and shadow. So that what you want to do when you're doing thick grass like this is to create lots of shadow, and that requires a lot of tone and a range of colours, I guess, or tones. So make sure you've got some darks and mids and lights. So I'm using blue violet now just to get a bit more dark happening in there. If you look at the grasses, you can see there's little patches of dark dirt or earth underneath. There we go. So that's coming along quite nicely. I'm happy with that. And again, because I lost some of the lights, I can come back now with my limey green and just put a few more bright strands in there. So they might be the ones that are catching the light on the tips as the sun's coming up or going down. I'm not sure which. But yeah, you can really have some fun with doing this kind of thing and finding the lights and highlighting different areas. So it's fun, keeps it fun. I love doing grass. It takes a long time to grow it. I'll make sure that you kind of cross over in front of each other too. So you try to kind of bend a few of the strands of grass so that they sit in front of the others and create that lovely thick lush feeling. There's a few little strands over on the left here, just those sparse ones that we've got sitting in the water. So you can brighten up a couple of them as well, just to bring them forward. Again, it helps to create perspective and gives us a feeling of distance. Lovely. All right, what else do we need to do? I'm just going to have a look at this and assess it. All right, so I'm going to tip off some of my dust again. Now the final little thing I want to add is those look like floating grasses just wandering around up in this section here. So I'm going to use my dark green, I think, and what we want to do is some little horizontal sort of shapes, but don't make them too dark. Just try to be quite sparse with them, and you don't want them to dominate, which I've just done. So now they look too much, but that's okay. I can soften them off with my pinks and things. So there's also a fair bit of grass up there around the grassy bank in the shore of the water. You might not want to put that in, you don't have to. So up to you. They're very fine though, those little pieces of grass around there. If you have pencil, that's probably going to be the best option. And so I've put a few little dark marks on there, as I said, and they're a little bit too dark. I'm just going to try this purple colour. Probably should have used that instead of the green. It's a little bit softer. It's quite nice. So this is a dark purple. It's a harder pastel as well. So the harder ones tend to be a lot nicer to use if you just want subtle marks. So because I've gone too dark with that green, what I'm going to do is come back over with my blue. So I've got blue water in this section here, and I'm just going to go over the top of it and kind of push it in a little bit so that it just softens off those dark marks. And I've got some pink or light colour. I can do the same with that. So I'm just softening it off. And it kind of, when you do that, I'm just using the pastel. I'm not using my fingers at all. And I'm just blurring everything off with the pastel. So running the pastel over those marks just sort of pushes them in a little bit and softens them off nicely. There's a bit of dust on there, so I'll tip that off again. And so that's looking much more natural now. So it's quite easy to change something, you know, if you do something a little bit too dark or too light, you can always come over it with the pastels that you might have used previously underneath, or that you might be able to use to soften things off. So, you know, there's always those options, which is lovely. Now, these things, these little clumps of stuff, grass and things, have a slight shadow on them. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of purple just in front of them to create a bit more shadow. Purple's always lovely for shadows, so don't ever underestimate that. And then again, I can lightly just pull my fingers across there like that and softly blur those off. So I think we're just about done with that one today. Yeah. I'm just going to break up this little bit of water in here, a couple of strands of grass, just to not have that really hard line through there. There's a bit of purple in there too. Soften it off. So you can always soften off your edges a little bit and just try to make things look more natural rather than having patterns and hard lines. There we go. So I think we are just about finished. I hope you've enjoyed today's class. I've had a ball. Dearly love doing landscapes and skies, and yeah, it's just the best ever. I do want to just darken up this reflection a tiny little bit. There we go. And I'm going to call that one done for now. Might come back later and do a bit more to it, maybe. And that's the lovely thing about pastels, isn't it? So, you know, even if I left this for a week, I can still come back and touch it up and change things, because they don't dry out and they never go off. And there's just so much room with pastels. So that's my favourite thing about them, is that they're just so malleable and forever able to be adjusted and changed. Even if you frame something and look at it for a while and think, oh gosh, I really should have chosen another colour or changed something, you can take it out and redo it. There's no reason you can't do that. So I hope you've enjoyed today's class. Don't forget to sign your painting. So I'm just going to find yourself a pencil if you have one handy. So a lighter pencil on a darker background, or vice versa. There you go. Pop your little name on there, and then you'll be able to frame it and put it out there for the world to see. So thank you very much for coming. And as I said, I hope today has been really enjoyable, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.